Chapter 1: The Long Drive Home. It was just past midnight when I finally managed to escape the clutches of my office building. The air was thick with an impending storm, and as I made my way to the car, I couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. The parking lot was deserted, save for my old, reliable sedan, which seemed to groan in protest as I started the engine. I had made this drive countless times, yet tonight, the familiar roads promised a journey unlike any other. As the first drops of rain began to fall, blurring the world outside my windshield, I set off towards home, unaware of the shadows that lurked in the darkness, waiting for a soul to wander too far from the light. As I merged onto the desolate country road that would lead me home, the storm unleashed its fury. Rain battered the car with relentless intensity, turning my field of vision into a watery blur. The road ahead seemed to stretch into infinity, a dark ribbon winding through the storm-swept landscape. Despite the familiarity of the route, a creeping sense of isolation took hold of me, as if I had ventured into uncharted territory where the rules of the mundane world no longer applied. The only companion to my solitary journey was the dull hum of the engine and the occasional flicker of lightning that illuminated the sky, casting ghostly shadows across the land. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, trying to shake off the eerie feeling that I was not alone. It was silly, I told myself. Years of consuming horror movies and books were toying with my imagination on a night that was perfectly designed for tales of hauntings and unspeakable horrors. Yet, as the miles passed, a deep, unsettling quiet settled in. The usual sounds of nighttime creatures were absent, swallowed by the storm. It was in this oppressive silence that I first heard it, a soft whisper, barely audible over the sound of the rain. I glanced at the empty passenger seat, half expecting to find someone there, but I was met with nothing but shadows. I focused on the road, telling myself it was just the wind. But then, there it was again, a whisper, this time clearer, a single word that sent a shiver down my spine: Ethan. My heart skipped a beat. The radio, which had been off, now emitted a soft static, as if it were trying to tune itself. I reached out to turn it off, but before my fingers could make contact, a voice emerged from the static, a voice so cold and distant it seemed to come from another world. "Come back," it said. I slammed my hand on the radio, shutting it off. Silence once again enveloped the car, save for the relentless assault of the rain against the windows. I was alone, truly alone, on a road that seemed to lead deeper into darkness with each passing second. The rational part of my mind fought to regain control, to dismiss the voice as a trick of the storm. But as I drove on, the edges of my reality began to fray, giving way to a fear that was all too real. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil within me, a prelude to the night of terror that awaited. Chapter 2: The Shape in the Rain. The storm showed no signs of abating as I drove on, the darkness around me punctuated only by the occasional flash of lightning. It was during one of these fleeting moments of illumination that I saw it, a shape on the side of the road. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow cast by the storm. But as I drew closer, the shape took on the form of a person, standing motionless in the rain. Instinctively, I slowed down, my heart racing. It was not uncommon for travelers to find themselves stranded on rural roads like this one, especially during such terrible weather. Yet, something felt off. The figure was shrouded in darkness, its features obscured by the night and the rain. "Need a lift?" I murmured to myself, more out of a sense of obligation than a genuine desire to stop. I pulled the car to a halt a few feet away and rolled down the passenger window. "Hey, do you need help?" I called out into the storm, but the howling wind swallowed my words. There was no response. The figure remained motionless, its silence more unsettling than if it had spoken. I strained my eyes, trying to make out any details that could tell me more about this mysterious person. But before I could discern anything, a bolt of lightning lit up the sky, and in that brief, blinding moment, the figure vanished. I blinked, disbelieving. I scanned the area where the figure had stood, but there was nothing, no sign of any person, no footprints in the muddy verge. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Had there ever been anyone there? Was my mind playing tricks on me, conjuring phantoms in the rain? With a sense of unease gnawing at my gut, I rolled up the window and drove on, casting frequent glances in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the figure reappear. But there was only the stormy night and the winding road behind me. The encounter left me shaken, the feeling of being watched lingering long after the shape in the rain had disappeared. I tried to focus on the road ahead, on the familiar landmarks that dotted the route home, but my thoughts were clouded by a growing sense of dread. It was as if the storm had awakened something, a presence that lurked just beyond the reach of my headlights. As the miles ticked by, the rain seemed to whisper secrets, each drop a word in a language I could not understand. The world around me felt charged with a hidden energy, a force that pulsed in the darkness, drawing me deeper into its mystery. I was so lost in my thoughts that I almost missed the turn off to Hollow Road. It was the quickest way home, a narrow, winding path that cut through dense woodland. As I made the turn, the trees closed in around me, their branches reaching out like the fingers of ghosts, scraping against the car in the wind. The sense of isolation deepened, the forest a dark maze that seemed to shift and change with each flash of lightning. I was entering the heart of the storm, both literally and metaphorically. Unbeknownst to me, this detour would take me not just through the physical landscape but through the shadows of my own past, towards a destiny that had been waiting for me, hidden in the whispers of the night. Chapter 3: Voices in the Static. The deeper I drove into the embrace of the forest on Hollow Road, the more the storm seemed to rage against me. Branches swayed menacingly above, as if warning me to turn back. But there was no turning back, not anymore. The road behind me felt just as perilous as the one ahead, both shrouded in an impenetrable darkness that my headlights could barely pierce. I tried to focus on the familiar, the rhythmic swipe of the windshield wipers, the hum of the tires against the wet road, anything to anchor me to the reality I knew. Yet, the eerie encounter with the vanished figure lingered in my mind, a harbinger of things I couldn't begin to comprehend. It was then, amidst the roar of the storm and the whirlwind of my thoughts, that the car radio flickered to life on its own. Startled, I glanced at the dashboard, where the display danced with static, cycling through frequencies in a frenzied search for a signal that wasn't there. Voices, faint and distorted, emerged from the chaos of the static. At first, they were indistinct, mere whispers lost in the white noise. But slowly, as if sensing my attention, they grew clearer, forming words, sentences, a message meant for me and me alone. Ethan. Come home. The voice was chillingly familiar, yet impossible. It was a voice from my past, one that belonged to someone long gone. My heart raced as I reached for the radio, intent on silencing the impossible. But my hand froze mid-air, captivated by the next words that emerged from the static. Turn back. Before it's too late. A cold dread settled over me, heavier than the rain pounding on the roof of the car. The road ahead suddenly felt menacing, a path leading me toward an unknown fate. The urge to turn the car around was overwhelming, yet something kept me driving forward, deeper into the storm, towards the voice that called me home. The radio continued its eerie transmission, a mix of static and whispers that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I tried to ignore it, to focus on the road ahead, but the voices clung to me, a constant presence in the car, a reminder that the boundaries between the living and the dead were thinner than I'd ever imagined. As Hollow Road twisted and turned through the dark heart of the forest, the storm reached a fever pitch. Lightning illuminated the sky in flashes of stark white, revealing glimpses of the road ahead and the shadows that danced just beyond the reach of my headlights. It was in one such flash of lightning that I saw it, the detour sign, half hidden by overgrown branches, pointing down an old, forgotten road that led through the oldest part of town. My initial reaction was to ignore it, to continue on the path I knew. But the voices in the static grew insistent, urging me down the forgotten road, toward secrets buried deep within the town's history and within my own family's past. With a sense of inevitability, I turned onto the detour, the car's tires crunching on the gravel road that seemed untouched by time. The forest receded, replaced by open fields and dilapidated buildings, relics of a bygone era. The voices in the static grew quieter, as if satisfied with my decision, leaving me with a haunting silence that was somehow more terrifying than their whispers. I was venturing into the unknown, driven by forces I couldn't understand, toward a destination that promised answers and, perhaps, a confrontation with the ghosts that had haunted my family for generations. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the night was far from over, and its secrets were waiting to be uncovered. Chapter 4: The Detour. The road less traveled unfolded before me, each turn revealing layers of the town's forgotten past. The detour, it seemed, was not just a deviation in my route, but a journey back in time, to a place where the echoes of long-ago tragedies still lingered in the air like the mist that clung to the ground. As I drove, the dilapidated buildings gave way to open fields, and then, just as suddenly, to a dense thicket of trees that crowded close to the road. It was here, amidst the shadows of towering oaks and whispering pines, that I felt the weight of the night pressing in on me, a tangible force that seemed intent on guiding me further from the path I knew. The radio had fallen silent, its previous messages now just a haunting memory. In its place, the sound of my own heartbeat filled the car, a steady rhythm that belied the growing sense of unease that twisted in my gut. I was alone, truly alone, in a part of town that time had forgotten, driving towards a destination unknown even to me. It was when the road began to narrow, the trees encroaching ever closer, that I saw it, the glow of lights ahead, faint but unmistakable in the darkness. My first thought was relief. Lights meant people, a chance to ask for directions, to maybe find a way back to a main road and away from this night that seemed to stretch into eternity. But as I drew closer, the source of the lights became clear. It was not the welcoming glow of a home or the security of a public place. It was a house, yes, but one so shrouded in disrepair and desolation that it seemed less a refuge than a monument to despair. The windows, from which the faint light emanated, were eyes that bore into me, and the open gate, a mouth ready to swallow me whole. This was the house on Hollow Road, a place whispered about in the tales of my childhood. A place said to be haunted, cursed even, its history a tapestry of tragedy and loss that stretched back generations. And yet, despite every instinct screaming at me to turn back, I found myself drawn to it, compelled by a force I couldn't understand. My car came to a stop at the edge of the property, the engine idling as I stared at the house. The light that had seemed inviting from a distance now flickered erratically, like a heartbeat on the verge of failing. It was then that I realized the light was not electric but candlelight, each flicker a whisper from the past, calling me closer. With a deep breath, I turned off the engine and stepped out into the night. The rain had lessened to a drizzle, but the air was thick with the scent of wet earth and something else, something faintly metallic, like blood. I shivered, not from the cold, but from the realization that I was about to step into a story that had begun long before I was born, a story that, perhaps, had always meant to include me. As I approached the house, each step felt heavy, as if I were walking against a tide that sought to pull me back. The whispers of the past grew louder with each step, until they were all I could hear, a cacophony of voices that begged for attention, for acknowledgement, for release. The door to the house stood ajar, an invitation or perhaps a challenge. With a final glance back at the road that had led me here, I crossed the threshold, entering a world where the boundaries between the living and the dead, the past and the present, were about to blur beyond recognition. Chapter 5: The House on Hollow Road. The air inside the house was thick with the scent of decay, a tangible reminder of the years that had passed since it last felt the warmth of life. The candlelight that had beckoned me from the road now revealed itself in scattered points throughout the grand foyer, casting long shadows that seemed to move of their own accord. It was as if the house itself breathed, each flicker of light a laboured inhale, each shadow a slow exhale. I stood there for a moment, on the threshold between the known and the unknown, my heart pounding in my chest. The urge to flee, to return to the safety of the familiar, was a physical ache. But deeper than the fear was a need to understand, to uncover the secrets that lay hidden within these walls, secrets that whispered my name with every creak of the floorboards. With a tentative step, I ventured further into the house, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The interior was a maze of corridors and rooms, each one a snapshot of a life interrupted. Dust-covered furniture stood as silent sentinels, and portraits of people long gone watched from the walls, their eyes following me as I passed. It was in the library that I found the first clue. The room was a cavern of books, shelves stretching from floor to ceiling, their contents untouched by time. Amidst the musty tomes, a journal lay open on a desk, its pages yellowed with age. The handwriting within was elegant but frantic, telling a tale of love, loss, and a curse that had plagued the family who once called this house home. My family. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The names within the journal were familiar, spoken in hushed tones by my parents whenever they thought I was out of earshot. This house, this cursed place, was part of my heritage, a legacy of darkness that I had unknowingly inherited. As I delved deeper into the journal, the story unfolded. A betrayal, a wrongful death, and a vow of vengeance from beyond the grave. The curse, it seemed, was the result of a spirit's wrath, bound to the house and to my family, seeking retribution for sins long past. The sound of a floorboard creaking behind me tore my attention from the journal. I turned, half expecting to find another remnant of the past made manifest. But there was only the empty room, the shadows cast by the candlelight seeming to mock my fear. It was then that I heard it, a whisper, softer than before but unmistakably real. "Help me," it said, a plea carried on the stale air of the house. The voice led me, drawing me deeper into the heart of the mansion, to a room that had been sealed shut. The door gave way under my shoulder with a protesting groan, revealing a chamber that was untouched by the decay that afflicted the rest of the house. In the center of the room stood a mirror, its surface clouded by age. As I approached, the air around me grew colder, the whisper growing louder, more insistent. "Help me," it repeated, the voice emanating from the mirror itself. With a trembling hand, I reached out, my fingers brushing the glass. In an instant, the room was filled with light, blinding and pure, and the reflections within the mirror shifted, revealing not my own image but that of a woman, her expression one of sorrow and desperation. "Our fates are intertwined," she said, her voice clear now, as if she stood beside me. "You have the power to end this curse, to free us both. But the path is fraught with peril, and the cost may be more than you can bear." Her words hung in the air, a challenge and a warning. The house on Hollow Road held the key to breaking the curse, but the journey would require me to confront the darkest parts of my family's past and my own soul. As the light faded and the room returned to darkness, I knew that my life would never be the same. The path ahead was uncertain, but I was determined to uncover the truth, to break the curse that had held my family in its grip for generations. Chapter 6: Whispers from the Past. The revelation within the mirror had changed everything. The house on Hollow Road was no longer just a symbol of my family's dark past, it was a nexus of unresolved spirits and curses that reached out through time, ensnaring me in its grip. The woman in the mirror, her sorrowful eyes and desperate plea, haunted me as I navigated the dim corridors of the house, her words echoing in my mind. "Our fates are intertwined." Determined to uncover the truth and break the curse, I delved deeper into the house's mysteries. The journal I had found was a key, but it was only the beginning. Each room, each dusty artifact, held fragments of the story, pieces of a puzzle that, when assembled, would reveal the path to salvation or damnation. As night deepened, the house seemed to come alive with whispers. Voices, too many to count, spoke from the shadows, each one a remnant of the past, pleading, warning, lamenting. It was as if the house itself was a medium, channeling the spirits bound to it by tragedy and betrayal. Among the whispers, one voice grew more insistent, guiding me to the house's heart, a hidden chamber beneath the grand staircase. The way was barred by a door that bore no lock but resisted all attempts to open, as if sealed by a force beyond the physical. Remembering the woman's words, I realized that the key was not a physical one. The curse was bound by blood and spirit, and it was through these that it could be undone. With a resolve born of desperation, I placed my palm against the door, whispering a plea for passage, an acknowledgement of the bond that tied me to this place. The door swung open, revealing a chamber untouched by time. At its center stood an altar, upon which lay a book bound in shadow, its pages filled with rituals and invocations, the knowledge of how to break the curse, or to seal it forever. As I approached, the whispers crescendoed into a single, coherent voice, the woman from the mirror. She materialized before me, her form more solid than before, yet still ethereal, a being caught between worlds. "Time is short," she said, her voice urgent. "The curse grows stronger with each passing moment. To break it, you must confront the one who cast it, to face the darkness within your own lineage and within yourself." Her words were a riddle, a map that led to a destination shrouded in shadow. The rituals in the book required more than just words, they demanded a sacrifice, a willing acceptance of the risk that I might lose myself in the process. Armed with the knowledge from the book and the guidance of the Spirit, I prepared to confront the curse's origin. The storm that had raged outside since my arrival seemed to mirror the turmoil within me, a physical manifestation of the battle I was about to wage. The ritual would have to take place in the heart of the forest, where the curse had been cast, where the betrayal that had set everything in motion had occurred. As I made my way there, the house behind me felt like a sentinel, watching my departure, its whispers a mixture of encouragement and warning. The forest at night was a labyrinth of shadows and secrets, the trees standing as silent witnesses to the centuries of sorrow and pain. The site of the ritual was marked by ancient stones, arranged in a circle, their surfaces worn by time but still holding the power that had been imbued in them long ago. As I began the ritual, the air around me thickened, the veil between the worlds thinning until it was almost non-existent. The spirits of the forest, of the house, of my own ancestors gathered, their presence a pressure against my skin. The words of the ritual were a key, unlocking the door to the past, allowing me to confront the source of the curse. As I spoke, the darkness responded, a figure emerging from the shadows, the architect of my family's suffering, a mirror reflecting the potential for darkness that resided in us all. The confrontation was both external and internal, a battle of wills and of spirits. The curse sought to protect itself, to perpetuate the cycle of vengeance and sorrow. But armed with the truth and the resolve to end the cycle, I pushed forward, through the pain and fear, toward a resolution that would either free us all or bind us tighter in its grasp. As the final words of the ritual were spoken, the world seemed to hold its breath, the boundary between light and dark, past and present, life and death, blurring into insignificance. The outcome of the ritual, the fate of my family, the spirits tied to the house on Hollow Road, and my own soul, hung in the balance, a delicate scale that could tip with the slightest whisper. Chapter 7: The Chase. The ritual's conclusion was marked not by a triumphant fanfare but by a silence so profound it felt like the world had stopped spinning. The forest around me, previously alive with the whispers of spirits and the rustle of unseen creatures, fell deathly quiet, as if holding its breath in anticipation of the outcome. In that moment of eerie calm, the figure that had emerged from the shadows during the ritual, the embodiment of the curse and the darkness within my lineage, began to dissipate, its form unraveling like smoke in the wind. But as it faded, a new terror took its place, a realization that the curse, though weakened, was not yet broken. The spirit's malevolent will, unwilling to relinquish its grip on the living world, sought a new vessel. Me. Panic took root as I understood the true cost of the ritual. Breaking the curse was not a matter of simply reciting ancient words and performing arcane gestures, it was a battle for my very soul. The forest, once a place of natural beauty, now felt like a prison, its trees like bars that trapped me with an entity that sought to consume me from the inside out. The chase began as a flight through the dark woods, the entity's presence a cold shadow at my back. It whispered promises of power and threats of eternal torment, its voice a cacophony that filled the night. Each step I took was fueled by a desperate hope that I could outrun the darkness, escape its reach, and find my way back to the light. But the forest was no longer the one I recognized. The paths twisted and turned upon themselves, leading me deeper into its heart, away from any hope of escape. The line between the physical and the spiritual blurred, the forest becoming a labyrinth that mirrored the turmoil within me. As I ran, the spirits of the house and the woman from the mirror appeared to me, not as guides, but as beacons of light in the overwhelming darkness. They urged me on, their presence a reminder of what I was fighting for, not just my life, but the freedom of all the souls bound by the curse. The chase climaxed at the edge of a cliff, a precipice that overlooked the dark waters of a forgotten lake, its surface as still and as black as obsidian. There was no further to run, no path left to take. Behind me, the entity's presence loomed, a pressure that threatened to crush me, to extinguish the last flicker of hope. It was there, backed against the void, that I made my stand. Drawing upon every ounce of strength, every shred of knowledge gained from the ritual and the spirits who had aided me, I confronted the entity. Words of power, words of binding and banishment, spilled from me, a torrent that matched the intensity of the storm that had heralded the beginning of this night. The entity recoiled, its form wavering under the assault, but it did not retreat. Instead, it lashed out, a final desperate attempt to claim victory, to drag me into the darkness with it. The air crackled with energy, the boundary between our worlds thinning to a razor's edge. In that moment, between one heartbeat and the next, everything hinged on a single, monumental effort of will. The curse, a chain that had bound generations, rattled one final time, teetering on the brink of destruction or renewal. And then, with a roar that echoed through the forest and across the lake, the entity shattered, its presence dissipating into the night, leaving behind nothing but a whisper of what had once been. I collapsed to the ground, exhausted, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The forest around me seemed to exhale, a collective release of tension as the spirits that had been trapped there for so long began to fade, their light winking out like stars at dawn. The curse was broken, the battle won, but at a cost that I was only beginning to comprehend. As I lay there, looking up at the sky as it lightened with the first hints of dawn, I knew that the world I would rise to was not the same one I had left behind. I had ventured into the darkness and emerged changed, marked by the journey in ways I could not yet fully understand.